Why Korean suspense films have become a global phenomenon. Beyond their dark portrayal of human nature and bold, explicit scenes, Korean films are also known for exploring the core of deep social and psychological issues. Recently, another bold suspense thriller, Murder Report, hit Korean theaters. Within a single month of release, it dominated the box office for 4 consecutive weeks. In the middle of a busy intersection in Seoul, a journalist named Seon-joo, just off work, suddenly received a strange, anonymous call. The man on the phone claimed to be the killer behind 11 murder cases that had taken place across Korea over the past few years.
여보세요?
MBS 백선조 기자님 맞으신가요?
네, 제가 백선주인데요. 무슨 일이시죠? 여보세요?
인터뷰 요청을 하고 싶습니다.
무슨 일 때문에 그러시죠?
He said he wanted to invite Seon-joo to do an exclusive interview about his crimes. During the interview, she would learn his identity, the details of his murders, and gain an exclusive story. But there was one condition. She couldn't call the police. If she reported it, the next victim would die immediately. Hearing his words, Seon-joo was filled with confusion. At first, she thought it might be someone's sick prank, but then she reconsidered. It didn't seem likely. She began looking into the murder cases the man mentioned and discovered that his knowledge of the crimes was even more precise than the police's. As a journalist, Seon-joo's instincts quickly told her that this man might have a personality disorder. He wanted to be interviewed not to confess, but to brag about his crimes. That meant he really could be the serial killer. Though conflicted, Seon-joo eventually agreed to the interview. Her decision wasn't only because it was a huge story, but also for another reason. She had been a seasoned journalist for many years, but recently, her career had hit a wall. She had been sidelined by her editors and was even at risk of losing her job. If she could pull off this interview, everything might turn around. She still didn't know why the killer had chosen her, but she sensed there must be a reason. She didn't go to the police, but she did confide in her boyfriend, Sang-woo. He was a detective, specializing in criminal investigations. Although he wasn't assigned to this particular case, the murders were so brutal that everyone in Korea knew about them. Even worse, there seemed to be no connection between the victims. The killer appeared to be choosing his targets at random. When Sang-woo learned that the serial killer had reached out to Seon-joo, his first instinct was to alert his colleagues. Whether the tip was real or fake, it was a chance to catch the man responsible. But Seon-joo told him not to report it yet. The killer had warned her not to.
3일 뒤 자정에 사람을 죽일 겁니다. 대신 기자님께서 인터뷰에 응해주시면 피해자를 살릴 기회를 드리겠습니다.
나 특종 떨어가는 거 아니야. 사람 구하러 가는 거지.
Realizing the murderer planned to strike again, Sang-woo froze. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was a reason the killer had contacted Seon-joo specifically. Could it be related to one of her past reports? Hearing that, Seon-joo also started to wonder. In the past, she had been fearless, exposing countless scandals and abuses of power. That courage had made her enemies and pushed her to the fringes of her workplace. If one of those stories had provoked the killer, Seon-joo wasn't afraid. After all, she was chasing the truth. If she died on that path, it would still be a meaningful end. When Seon-joo decided to meet the killer alone, the worried Sang-woo came up with a plan. He told her to meet the man as agreed, while he stayed nearby, ready to intervene at any moment if something went wrong. With his protection, Seon-joo felt slightly more at ease. Following the address the man had given, she arrived at Seoul's first guest house. The man had already reserved the room in advance. Seon-joo tried to ask the front desk about him, but the staff had never seen him before. The reservation was made online. While checking in, she also noticed that the hotel's surveillance system was under maintenance. Clearly, the killer had prepared in advance. Although she didn't know exactly who he was, Seon-joo didn't back down. She took the keycard and stepped into the elevator. Before heading up, she secretly duplicated the card and left one at the spot she'd agreed on with Sang-woo. With a nervous heart, she entered the room. She first inspected the layout, then took out the small cameras she had brought and discreetly placed them in different corners. Meanwhile, Sang-woo was setting up his laptop in the room below. He connected remotely to her earpiece and cameras, ensuring a live feed. Once everything was ready, he sent her a signal. And just as they finished syncing, the time had arrived for their scheduled meeting. At the exact second-hands mark, the doorbell rang. Looking at the clock on the wall, Seon-joo took a deep breath and walked toward the door. But when she opened it, the man standing outside wasn't what she expected. He looked polite and refined, dressed neatly and speaking softly. Even his hair was carefully styled. While Seon-joo was still gathering her composure, the man politely asked if he could come in. Realizing her awkward reaction, Seon-joo quickly invited him inside. Facing the calm, well-mannered man, she skipped small talk and went straight to the point. He claimed to be the serial killer, but that was only his word. Seon-joo wanted proof, something that could make her believe he was who he said he was. Hearing Seon-joo's request, the man did not get angry. Instead, he calmly pulled a phone from his pocket and handed it over. Seon-joo looked down and found a video playing on the phone. The video showed footage of the killer committing murders. Seeing the images, even seasoned Seon-joo felt a chill run down her spine. Although it was their first meeting, Seon-joo could tell the man's clothing, manners, and behavior were extremely proper. He clearly looked like a well-bred, successful professional. But in the video, the man was a different person, utterly monstrous. She could not imagine how the same person could display such a stark contrast. Convinced the man was the serial killer, Seon-joo turned on her camera. She wanted the man to introduce himself, but the man refused to give his name and instead began to tell Seon-joo why he had killed those people so brutally.
선생님께 살해당한 피해자들 대부분이 중범죄 전과자들이거나 평소 품행이 방정치 못했던 사람들이죠. 이에 비춰봤을 때 스스로 사회를 정화해 간다는 명분으로
자경단적 살인 행위를 벌여왔다. 이렇게 판단하신 건가요?
It turned out the 11 victims were not decent people. They had all committed crimes, and their methods had been particularly cruel. One of them was especially egregious, a wealthy heir. The wealthy heir drove after drinking, and an entire family was killed under his car. Facing such a scumbag, the man smashed him to death with a sledgehammer. Hearing his account, Seon-joo assumed he saw himself as a kind of vigilante, using violence to punish criminals. Based on that assumption, she challenged him with the idea of fighting violence with violence. But when Seon-joo questioned him, the man only smiled and denied her view. He said his brutal killings were actually a way to treat his patients. He called the victims tumors.
정확히 말해 암덩어리들이죠. 제 환자들 영혼에 상처를 내고 기생하는 암세포들. 전 그걸 제거해서 환자들을 치료한 것뿐입니다.
It turned out Yeong-hoon was a psychiatrist, but his methods differed from other doctors. Other psychiatrists treated patients through counseling, but he took the opposite approach. If a patient had been bullied, he would eliminate the bully. This way, the patient could be cured, and society could be rid of a threat. Although Yeong-hoon denied he was some kind of righteous avenger, Seon-joo noticed he looked proud rather than remorseful when he described his actions. It was clearly a pretense of justice used to satisfy his murderous impulses. Instead of exposing Yeong-hoon, Seon-joo steered the conversation in another direction and asked why he had chosen her for the interview. If the interview were exposed, the police would quickly identify him and arrest him. But Yeong-hoon did not seem worried, and he framed his actions as those of a pioneer.
위험을 무릅쓰고서라도 꼭 해야 하는 일이 있는 법이죠. 안 그런가요? 그럼 기자님께서는 왜 인터뷰에 응하셨죠? 위험을 무릅쓰고.
그야 제가 해야 할 일이라고 판단했으니까요. 그리고 선생님께서 약속하셨으니까요. 비밀을 지키면 안전을 보장하겠다고.
As she listened, Seon-joo's mind raced, and she tried to shift the topic to the next potential victim. If she could learn who he planned to target next, the police could act. Just as she was thinking how to approach the subject, Yeong-hoon unexpectedly gave her an opening. He asked Seon-joo why she had risked coming to interview him. Without hesitation, Seon-joo answered honestly. She did not treat Yeong-hoon as a monster. She treated him as an interview subject. Her frankness pleased him. He said he had chosen Seon-joo because she was a capable reporter who had exposed many social issues and did not fear authority. But feeling hit on a sensitive spot by his praise, Seon-joo abruptly interrupted him and demanded to know who his next victim would be. He still refused to reveal anything. Losing her patience, Seon-joo called off the interview and decided to leave the room. Just as she reached the door, Yeong-hoon stopped her. He told Seon-joo that if she left the room now, that victim would die immediately. Hearing his warning, Seon-joo was clearly unsettled. Could the victim he meant be herself? Reluctantly, she returned. This time she did not want to hear Yeong-hoon's explanations about treatment. She only wanted to understand his motive for creating these murders. But faced with her questions, he did not follow her lead and instead began to tell a story. A few years earlier, in an underground parking garage in Seoul, a shocking rape had occurred. A woman 9 months pregnant had been assaulted in the apartment complex's garage. Although the police immediately arrested the perpetrator, the attacker left an indelible trauma on the pregnant woman. Whenever she looked into her child's eyes, she was reminded of the scene in the garage. She developed a severe mental disorder and eventually jumped from the rooftop with her newborn child.
선생님 아내분인가요?
Hearing Seon-joo's questioning, Yeong-hoon sighed deeply but did not become angry. That unfortunate woman was Yeong-hoon's wife. After his wife's death, he completely fell apart. But that was not what drove him most desperate. At trial, the main culprit who ruined his wife's life received only a 4-year sentence. Watching the brazen attacker, Yeong-hoon's heart planted the seed of revenge. He began to train his body and meticulously planned his revenge. He even worked out exactly how he would deal with that scumbag. But just one day before the criminal was due to be released, an accident occurred. The criminal accidentally electrocuted himself while repairing wiring in the prison. The sudden turn of events left Yeong-hoon like a deflated balloon. Not being able to kill the perpetrator himself became a persistent emotional burden for him. He spent his days in a daze, drowning himself in alcohol. Just when he thought he would become a vagrant, he accidentally met a man who was suffering in the same way. The man had once had a happy family, but a drunken, wealthy heir destroyed that life. The man's wife died in the crash, and his young son was left in a vegetative state. After the accident, the wealthy heir did not go to prison but continued partying in bars as if nothing had happened. Looking at the arrogant heir, the man initially planned to run him down with his car. But at the moment he was about to press the accelerator, he hesitated. He wasn't afraid of being arrested. He worried that if he acted, his vegetative son would have no one to care for him. Hearing the man's lament, Yeong-hoon saw his former self reflected, and a bold idea flashed into his mind.
그 사람 죽여드릴까요? 라고 했을 때 하지만 제 사연을 듣더니 금방 동질감을 느끼더군요. 치료에 있어 그것보다 중요한 건 없거든요. 의사와 환자 간의 신뢰.
After gaining the man's approval, Yeong-hoon set his plan in motion. He first found an opportunity to kidnap the wealthy heir, then bludgeoned him to death with a sledgehammer. Seeing the killer who had destroyed his family finally taken down, the man felt an overwhelming sense of joy. And it was this first killing that gave Yeong-hoon an unprecedented thrill. He seemed to have found a purpose in life, and from then on, things spiraled out of control. Hearing Yeong-hoon's account, Seon-joo felt he was not treating patients, but creating more tragedies. If fighting violence with violence really worked, then what purpose would the law serve? The law is not only meant to punish wrongdoers, but more importantly, to protect the weak. However, Yeong-hoon did not accept Seon-joo's theory. If the law truly worked, there would not be so many tragedies in the world, nor would evil people run rampant. It is precisely for this reason that such people repeatedly trample the boundaries of the law. Because of this disagreement, they began to argue. Just as neither could convince the other, the doorbell rang again. Seon-joo thought Yeong-hoon had accomplices, but he told her not to be nervous. It was only room service. He opened the door, and a server pushing a trolley appeared. Seeing the steak on the cart, he took out a bill from his wallet to tip. But just as the server reached for the money, Yeong-hoon suddenly attacked.
아시냐고요?
저 새끼 뭐 하는 거야?
Staring at the server who had been suddenly killed, Seon-joo and Sang-woo downstairs were stunned. They could not have imagined Yeong-hoon would commit murder in front of them. Seon-joo thought the server was the victim Yeong-hoon had mentioned, but he said the server was merely incidental. It turned out the server was not a decent person either. He was a voyeur who secretly filmed guests in intimate situations and then blackmailed them. One woman, unable to bear it, chose to take her own life. After killing the server, Yeong-hoon showed no reaction. He swaggered over to the table and began eating the steak that had been delivered. Seeing Yeong-hoon's calmness, Seon-joo realized she had underestimated him. However, Yeong-hoon's next account was even harder for her to accept. After killing the wealthy heir, he found his direction. Posing as a volunteer, he appeared at psychiatric hospitals across Korea. Whenever he encountered patients who had been bullied by villains, he would treat them in his own way. To give his patients more satisfaction, he even developed various methods of murder. There was water torture, a swing method, and even chainsaw-style killings. And his methods supposedly helped those patients emerge from their darkness. Watching the self-satisfied Yeong-hoon, Seon-joo interrupted him again.
죄책감을 느끼진 않았나요?
그럴 리가 있나요? 이미 말씀드렸듯이 저는 의사로서의 소명을
아니요. 당신 말고 환자들이요. 복수의 끝은 늘 공허하죠. 그 공허함은 죄책감으로 차오르기 마련이고요. 당신 환자들도 그랬을 거예요. 죄책감을 느낀 사람들이 분명히
있었죠.
Hearing Seon-joo's doubts, Yeong-hoon agreed with her point of view. But the world is such that if the weak dared to resist, evil people would naturally be less likely to run wild. But the premise is that they must have the courage to resist. However, Yeong-hoon did not blame these weak people, since not everyone has that courage. Midway through, he took a coin from his pocket, and instead of continuing the topic, he began to tell the story of a victim who was exceptionally talented at the violin. This victim was born into poverty but showed outstanding talent on the violin. The parents poured everything they had into helping the child become a musician, but because the child shone too brightly, other classmates retaliated. Not only was his violin destroyed, his violin-playing hand was broken. Hearing Yeong-hoon's story, Sang-woo downstairs suddenly stood up. He told Seon-joo to keep Yeong-hoon calm while he went to arrest him. Hearing Sang-woo was going to make an arrest, Seon-joo looked warily at the equipment on the table. But when Sang-woo reached the door to open it, he found the keycard unresponsive. Realizing something was wrong, Sang-woo had to halt his action. He told Seon-joo to keep the man steady. Yeong-hoon, in the middle of his account, noticed Seon-joo's strange look, but he did not expose her, and continued his story. He asked Seon-joo if she were the child's family, what would she choose to do? His question left Seon-joo momentarily at a loss for words. Under Korean law, the attacker would at most be charged with intentional injury. If the perpetrator is a minor, they might not even be sent to prison. After thinking it over, Seon-joo finally voiced her opinion. If she were the child's parent, she would never let the perpetrator go free. Seon-joo's answer earned Yeong-hoon's approval, and he had no intention of letting the abuser go unpunished. He had previously hypnotized the perpetrator over the phone. With one more call from him, the abuser would leap from the rooftop. Hearing Yeong-hoon's words, Seon-joo suddenly snapped back to her senses. Could this abuser be the same target he mentioned on the phone? But what she didn't expect was still to come. The child's fingers had been cut off one by the attacker with a blade, the method unbearably cruel. When Yeong-hoon mentioned the blade, Seon-joo suddenly thought of her daughter. Not long ago, she had found a bloody blade in her daughter's backpack. And lately, her daughter's attitude toward her had become strange, often bursting into anger for no reason. But because of work, Seon-joo hadn't paid much attention. Then it hit her. Could her own daughter be the bully who hurt that girl?
가해자란 나이 혹시 제 딸인가요?
아닌데요. 이 사건 남학생들 사이에서 일어난 일인데요.
When she saw that the abuser in the photo was a boy, Seon-joo finally breathed a sigh of relief. As she was still dazed, Yeong-hoon suddenly flicked the coin in his hand. The spinning coin reflected a faint light, and Seon-joo's eyes momentarily lost focus. Without realizing it, she began talking about her daughter. Her daughter had recently shown similar symptoms, quick-tempered and irritable, lashing out at the smallest disagreement. At first, Seon-joo thought her daughter was just entering adolescence and going through a rebellious phase, so she tried to guide her gently. But whenever she approached, her daughter would snap back harshly. To make things worse, last month she received a court summons. Her ex-husband was suddenly fighting for custody. Her daughter also wanted to live with him. This broke Seon-joo's heart. She couldn't understand why. Though she wasn't as wealthy as her ex-husband, she had always loved her daughter deeply. She couldn't figure out why their relationship had suddenly fallen apart. Sang-woo's shout jolted Seon-joo back to reality. She turned and realized that she had been hypnotized by Yeong-hoon. Angrily, she demanded to know why he had hypnotized her. But Yeong-hoon gave no explanation. At that moment, Sang-woo told her that the red pen on the table was actually a disguised electric stun pen. If things went wrong, she could use it to fight back. Hearing Sang-woo's warning, Seon-joo pretended to end the interview. While packing her things, she quietly gripped the pen in her hand. But before she could turn around, Yeong-hoon called out to her again. He told her that his real purpose wasn't the interview. It was to meet the man downstairs.
무슨...
안 그래도 오늘 형사 한 분을 만나 뵙기로 약속을 잡아놨거든요. 아까부터 아래층에서 기다리고 계셨는데.
뭐라는 거야, 저 새끼가?
이제 곧 올라오실 거예요.
Sang-woo. Hearing her boyfriend's name, Seon-joo froze, and Sang-woo instantly realized Yeong-hoon had known about him all along. Feeling the situation turn, Sang-woo tried to leave, but when he reached the door, he found it had somehow been locked from the outside. As he stood there confused, the phone in the room suddenly rang. Before he could react, he felt his limbs weaken, and moments later, he collapsed to the ground. It turned out Yeong-hoon had already predicted that Seon-joo would bring Sang-woo along. He had planted hypnotic gas in the room beforehand. The phone call was both a signal that he knew their plan and a trigger to release the gas. Realizing that Yeong-hoon had outsmarted them, Seon-joo panicked. She tried to launch a surprise attack but was caught off guard by Yeong-hoon instead.
정신과 의사들은 순발력이 뛰어나죠. 환자가 갑자기 어떤 돌발 행동을 할지 모르니까요.
When Seon-joo regained consciousness, she found herself tied to a chair. Yeong-hoon took out a pack of knives from his pocket and asked why she had broken her promise. Faced with his cold question, Seon-joo grew terrified. But just when she thought he was about to kill her, Yeong-hoon told her that the person being interviewed today was actually himself. Seon-joo remembered what Sang-woo had said earlier. Could it be that one of her previous reports had hurt someone deeply? She quickly recalled an investigation she had done before. She asked Yeong-hoon if this was because of the Daishin Biotech case. Hearing the company's name, Yeong-hoon smiled eerily. He raised the knife towards Seon-joo, but instead of harming her, he cut the tape that bound her body. His action left Seon-joo completely puzzled. As she struggled to understand, Yeong-hoon picked up a phone from the table, showing a live feed of Sang-woo's room. On the screen, Sang-woo was writhing on the floor, trying to break free, but no matter how hard he struggled, it was useless. Yeong-hoon told Seon-joo to talk about her previous investigation. That was why he had come. A year earlier, Seon-joo had received a tip from a company employee who reported that a biotech firm was dumping untreated wastewater. To cover it up, the company had bribed high-ranking officials. Although the matter was suppressed, the pollution had caused nearby residents to develop cancer. Unable to live with his guilt, the employee collected evidence and gave it to Seon-joo, hoping she would expose the truth. Once she had the documents, Seon-joo immediately began investigating. She soon verified the company's crimes and even uncovered more secrets. But the night before the story was to air, she returned home to find all her files stolen. The whistleblower also died in a car crash. A series of strange events made Seon-joo realize her investigation had been discovered. But that wasn't the worst part. A month ago, Seon-joo was suddenly accused anonymously of fabricating a smear campaign against the company. Her editor, fearing trouble, decided to fire her. But worried she might really have evidence, they chose to isolate her instead, making it impossible for her to continue working. Seon-joo thought Yeong-hoon had targeted her out of revenge for the biotech report, but he shook his head. He told her that the anonymous complaint had actually come from him. And the reason he did it wasn't because of the pollution case. It was to treat her.
그리고 제가 기자님을 모신 건 기자님을 해치기 위해서가 아닙니다. 치료해드리기 위해서죠.
날 치료한다고요?
네.
Hearing his words, Seon-joo was completely stunned. She had never even met this man. Why did he want to treat her? Just as Seon-joo was confused, Yeong-hoon picked up the phone again. On the screen, Sang-woo had found a loose screw somewhere and was trying to cut through the tape binding his hands, but instead of stopping him, Yeong-hoon calmly watched, as if allowing him to free himself. He told Seon-joo that Sang-woo wasn't trying to escape danger but was desperate to silence someone. And the person he wanted to silence wasn't Yeong-hoon. It was Seon-joo. According to him, the person who had stolen the evidence back then was none other than Sang-woo himself. When the biotech company realized the pollution scandal had been leaked, they came up with a plan. They sent a woman to get close to Sang-woo. Then, while he was intimate with her, they secretly recorded the scene to use as blackmail. Left with no choice, he had to compromise. But instead of finding a way out, Sang-woo went even deeper and started working with the company. He promised to steal the evidence in exchange for a promotion to department chief. But how could the biotech company ever agree? They turned around and threatened Sang-woo, saying that if he failed to get the evidence, they would release the photos. With no way out, Sang-woo did as he was told. But that wasn't the worst of his sins. While stealing the files, Seon-joo's daughter came home and caught him in the act. After realizing his actions had been exposed, the despicable Sang-woo assaulted her and recorded a video to keep her silent.
혜린이를 성폭행한 겁니다.
Seeing the footage on the phone, Seon-joo was completely stunned. It all finally made sense. Her daughter's change in behavior, the anger, the fear, it was all because of Sang-woo. She remembered the night the evidence was stolen, how Sang-woo had come by pretending to help, and how her daughter had looked at him with dread. Realizing the truth, Seon-joo's entire sense of morality shattered. There was only one thought left in her mind, to tear Sang-woo apart. Only now did she finally understand Yeong-hoon's earlier words. Some things can never be understood until they happen to you. The reason Yeong-hoon had invited her to this interview was that her daughter had come to him for psychological help. After hearing what the girl had suffered, he orchestrated the entire event, and the target he intended to eliminate was Sang-woo. Yeong-hoon opened his phone and scrolled to a number. Seon-joo saw her daughter's name on the screen and, trembling, dialed the call.
엄마, 지금 의사 선생님이랑 같이 있어? 엄마, 미안해. 내가 진작 말하려고 했는데.
예, 예린 양. 엄마는 제가 잘 챙길 테니까 걱정 말고 집에 가 있어요. 알겠죠? 이제 마지막 선택만 남았습니다. 어떻게 하시겠어요? 치료를 원하십니까?
When she heard her daughter's voice, the fury inside her finally erupted. Yeong-hoon asked if she was ready to begin her treatment, but Seon-joo refused to accept it. She wanted to confront Sang-woo face to face. Yeong-hoon didn't stop her but warned her to be prepared. When Seon-joo reached the lower floor, Sang-woo had just freed himself. Seeing her storm in, he immediately realized his secret was exposed. But instead of confessing, he tried to lie, claiming she had been hypnotized by Yeong-hoon. Looking at the deceitful man, Seon-joo's last shred of trust collapsed. But before she could react, Sang-woo suddenly grabbed her gun. To keep his crimes hidden, he intended to kill her. As he struck her, Yeong-hoon appeared silently behind him.
그만하시죠, 한상우 씨.
너 이 미친 새끼.
너무 흥분하셨네요.
닥쳐 이 개새끼야. 인연이랑 너랑 죽이면 다 끝이야. 알겠어?
그러지 말고 진정하세요. 그거 봐요. 너무 흥분하니까 총알 없는 것도 모르셨잖아요.
이 개새끼!
Seeing Seon-joo beside him, Sang-woo finally understood. He had been trapped. Yeong-hoon asked once again if Seon-joo wanted the treatment. This time, she didn't hesitate. She accepted. When Sang-woo opened his eyes again, he was in a white room. Yeong-hoon picked up a scalpel and removed the source of Sang-woo's sins.
무서워요? 당신도 느껴봐요. 예린이가 느꼈을 고통과 두려움.
And that's the complete story of Murder Report, the latest Korean suspense film of 2025. The obsession of the police, the twisted mind of the killer, and the despair of the victim's family intertwine, turning the pursuit of truth into a brutal test of human nature. The open-ended conclusion is deeply impactful, and its unanswered reflection carries more weight than a clear resolution. Well, that's all for today. See you next time.